ask you
Well,
again.
I'm
Do
just
you think
taking a
that the
step back.
existence of protected classes and the ability to take your employers to court, for instance, over perceived discriminatory practices has a positive, negative, or no effect on the amount of discrimination that's going to occur in your society?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay.
You could have just said, look, these hairspray bottles causing the ozone, and and customers would be concerned with that, and as
Oh
a
yeah,
result, the
just
market will
tell
just reduce
customers
them.
that, hey, this is bad for them, and then they will all stop using it. That seems...
Well, yeah, I mean, technically, every
Wait,
country that wants to be cheaper
so if
options for people.
if this was true, then why did things like the Rockefeller monopoly even like exist? How could that
Well,
even
I don't agree
come
that
into
there was a
existence?
monopoly because he lowered prices every year. Since
Let's
then,
say you have an
Rockefeller,
important bridge that's
yeah.
coming, like a vital part of like logistical moving, and you have somebody who's very wealthy who purchases that bridge, and now
Mhm.
they want to charge a very high toll for people to get in and out of to travel across this bridge. What do you do?
Yeah,
Yeah,
into the
which is
pocket of
very different from what you were saying, which is why I'm very skeptical to anything else you have to
also.
say, because you will just misrepresent things that you bring up.
Okay, let me just show a graph from the
So now are we
from
pivoting to something else right now, or what is this?
from
Because you lied
the
about what this study proved.
fuck you! I'm not a liar. My name is Philosophical Zombie Hunter. I am a objectivist, or at least I try to study objectivism. I believe, economically speaking, in a night watch state and laissez-faire capitalism. And I do debates with people, typically around economics and ethics.
Okay, excellent. And you're here today to try to minarchist pill me, yes?
Well, at least at least open you to some new ideas, I suppose.
All right, excellent. Okay. Do you want me to give my general issues? So actually, hold on. Actually, we should start on this end. So describe your minarchist state. What that looks like, and what exactly you will have be provided by the state, and what's, well, will not be included on.
Okay, so the state in my perfect world will be a limited state, and it will essentially function to protect people's individual rights. So police to stop us from killing each other, courts to settle disputes for a similar reason, army to protect us from aggression from abroad, and that is essentially it.
Okay. Does this
Um,
protection from the government include like protected classes and stuff like that? Should people be discriminated from things like employment?
so technically no, but I'll explain the reason behind it. So um,
I can give
protecting
an
people.
example, and then you can explain how
Oh,
your
sorry.
solution
So
solves it.
the concept of rights is something that you're wondering about.
No, I can give you a situation, and then you can explain to me how your system solves for this. So,
Sure.
let's say there is like yeah, let's say that there is a community with a minority that is non-white. Let's say you have like a small let's say Hispanic, or let's say you have a black population there in that little community, and that community discriminates heavily when it comes to their employment, and that they may not want to employ, they might not want to sell to people that are non-white in their local community. How does your system solve for this issue? Because right now under our system, we have things like protected classes where you are unable to discriminate on people on the basis of these traits, and these people are, yeah, cannot be refused services on account of that. So with your service, with your society, without the existence of things like protected classes, how do you deal with this?
So I would object to the idea of having racism within the law, or have a situation where some classes are protected and some classes are not. My system protects for individual rights, meaning the tiniest minority is the individual. Everyone has equal legal rights in our system, but at the same time, uh, people are allowed to discriminate. They're allowed to discriminate, but they will suffer basically market forces as a result of this discrimination. So if people don't hire a certain minority group because they don't like it, then they suffer from the benefit they could have gotten from hiring those people versus other people. They could have negative reputation in the market, or they could be boycotted by that community. In general, the aim is to make or to protect individuals, protect everyone equally, but only apply force when force has been initiated.
Okay, so I mean, so basically, you would say that these people would be free to discriminate. So then, this small racist community with like a 90%, 95% white population then could entirely freely, legally discriminate against the 5% black population, deny them access to employment and stuff like that. And the way that your system supposedly would solve for this would be through the use of things like market forces. So then I ask you then, if market forces...
Can I add a second? So
Mhm.
my system would give minorities or individuals specifically much more opportunities for employment than there are now. There'll be less barriers to entry for people to enter the market and start their own business. Some people will say these people are valuable, they're human beings. We should hire them just for our own selfish reasons because they are very effective at X, Y, and Z, and we would like to bring them on to our work.
So you have the market
And that's how
forces
they will
reason
be
again
solved.
here then, yeah.
Sorry?
So now we're looping back to the market forces thing.
The market forces is a sort of punishment for people who do bad things. So reputation would be hurt.
Yeah, so we're looping back to them. I just wanted to distinguish that there. So you said that, okay, well, these people could, it would be easier for them to create their own business. I mean, maybe, but if you have a community where, you know, you have a big part, the biggest hegemony, the biggest portion of the population is racist and doesn't want to cooperate with you or doesn't want to trade with you or doesn't want to offer your services, then even if you create your own company, that's not going to particularly help you very much. So then we kind of loop back to this main argument of like market forces are going to solve for these things, because if you discriminate, then you're going to face negative repercussions when it comes to reputation, and you might lose out on economic output and stuff like that. So then I ask you, you know, from your perception then, if you believe that market forces...
Hold on, you've made a lot of assumptions there.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to talk about that. So bear in mind, this is a hypothetical, right? This isn't.
I don't think this is an incredibly unrealistic hypothetical by any means,
well,
but
let's
go
talk
on.
about that. Let's discuss that. So even in situations where you had like separation in America, you had like if two communities didn't want to interact with one another, and I think that's a bad thing. That's a negative thing. If two communities did not want to interact with one another, then you know within the community, I believe, I could be wrong, within the black community they made their own black businesses, they made their own places where people can interact, and to some degree they were prosperous in doing that. And unless
To a
I'm wrong
greatly
around there,
lesser degray though, and greatly dependent on
I
the
I'm not
amount of non-white people around you. So
but they were doing well, I believe. I could be
well
wrong
is a
here.
very
If
relative
I
term there.
let me just end with my last sentence there. I do believe that Milton Friedman, the economist, used to visit 1930s Harlem because it was, and I think even the 1920s, there was a lot of intermingling because there was a very interesting culture there musically, and there was a lot of intermingling, and that's what you would expect in a free society, this sort of intermingling. I don't know if it's necessarily a good idea to force people to do something because that builds resentment, but just leaving people alone and allowing them to intermingle, to see like that the other side isn't as bad as they had imagined, I think that's a better
Well, people
approach.
weren't really left alone, right? They were heavily discriminated against. You lived in a basically
I think you're
two-tiered system back
you're
then with Jim Crow.
I appreciate that. I'm you know, I don't think that it was a good situation,
Okay.
but you're asking whether to force people to do something where I'm suggesting that it's still a bad idea that they're discriminating, but I would not force them necessarily. I would persuade them to do that.
Okay, so basically, you like a portion of the population is then condemned to lesser aspects of society, lesser markets, lesser well-being, basically, on account of the fact that they're not part of the hegemonic group and are thus discriminated against.
In your science fiction world, yes.
Okay, this is by no means science fiction, but that's okay. I'm sure most people would realize that this is not the case.
In your imaginary look, you had lots of groups coming into America that were discriminated against. You had the Jewish, you had the Irish,
Mhm,
you had the Italian. Everyone had their turn at being discriminated,
mhm.
and eventually everyone mixed together in a big melting pot. So
And do you think
the
a
fact
big
that you're
reason for
saying
why
the
people were able to mix
condemned,
together was because we got rid
let
of
me
a
just
lot of the discriminatory
please,
policies and we enacted things like protected classes, so people
Rose,
weren't allowed to discriminate on the basis of
Rose,
these things?
let me just finish for a
All right.
second. I'm just showing the historical trends here. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying you are catastrophizing the situation, saying human beings are inherently evil and they will always be racist. Some people will open their eyes and see that racism is a bad thing,
Okay,
especially
so
when they're free to do so.
yeah, so then I ask you very simply then, because once again, you seem to be kind of revolving back to this explanation again of things will work out on their own, market forces will solve for these things. then I will ask you again the question I've been
No,
trying
so
to ask for a while.
can I
Wait,
correct you?
I need to get this question through
May
because
I
I've been trying to
correct
ask
you?
this question for 5 minutes.
Right, but
So
you
my
said
question then, and you can feel free to correct me as I ask the question. So if
okay.
you believe that market forces will incentivize and will interact with one another in a way where you bring about a more race egalitarian society, then why have we seen market societies in existence in the past? And, not even in the too far past, where you still had these things. Assuming that your analysis is accurate and that it holds up, we should already have seen the market forces solve for these things. But no, we didn't see that. We saw firms choosing to continuously discriminate against non-white populations, despite this analysis that you give. Well, if they do that, they're going to suffer reputationally, or they're going to lose out on potential economic output. This doesn't seem to be true. That solving discrimination seems to be a lot more complex, and one of the key tools we have to solve this discrimination is the government, in the sense that they can do things like protected classes in order to ensure that people aren't allowed to discriminate against people for immutable characteristics.
Okay, well let's talk about that. So you're in Sweden, right?
Yes. Well,
Okay,
yeah, I'm
so how
Swedish, but I'm in the Netherlands now. But
so let's just say Sweden for argument's sake. How is the government solving discrimination there currently?
I mean, we have issues with this currently. Like all countries have
Well,
issues with
talk
it.
to me about it then.
The issues
What
that we
sort of
have right
issues?
now in Sweden when it comes to discrimination.
Yes.
Yeah, so right now we have quite a bit of workplace discrimination specifically, which I think applies to this in the best possible way, in which the name of an applicant seems to have an effect on whether or not they're going to be hired. And the reason why the name is important is because it has certain ethnic connotations to it. And that's the major hypothesis for how things exist today. Now, even though we have those issues right now in a society with a state, that doesn't get you to the point that both of our societies have this issue to an equal extent. Because while in my society, this type of discrimination has to be, done in a non-explicit capacity and probably a lot less successfully, in your society, these people can just straight up said, oh, no, sorry, we don't want to hire non-Swedes. We don't want to hire non-whites, and be excluded on the basis of that. So even though both of our societies have issues, your society is going to have it a lot more.
Well, so again, I don't see how you can force people to do something they're not what they don't want to do outright. I mean, yes, you can stop them from hurting someone in a particular way, but if they don't want to hire someone, they can make up whatever excuse they want. And as far as I'm aware,
But it becomes harder
in
for them, no?
In Sweden, you have extremely low immigrant labor participation rates, and it could be the case that in Norway, which I have a bit more experience with, they also do the similar thing. They'll tell you, just because of your CV, they'll tell you, look, we want someone who's a cultural fit because it helps communication, and we are not willing to hire you. So in any which case, at the very least, my system will allow these immigrants to prosper on their own, in a sense that they can open their own businesses more easily, or they can gain access to capital more easily, or there'll be more job opportunities for them in my system than yours, and they'll be able to proceed in having a better life. Maybe it will take a bit longer in a particular racist society, entirely possible.
Mm-hmm.
But in my system, at least they have less things blocking their way to succeed.
Pull you back here a bit. Do you think that, like all else equal, the fact that
But
protected classes exist and it's possible to take, things like employers to court has a positive or negative effect on the ability for people to combat discrimination?
Rose, 1 second. Can I just take a step back? Why? We usually, like, when we start talking about these things, we start talking about the system. What does it mean? What is important to you? We've skipped past that straight to an aggressive immigration debate. Because immigration in my system,
it's about protected classes more than anything.
Okay, immigration, just as an example, in my system is much easier than yours.
I'm not sure what this has to do with anything we're talking about.
In a free market, it's much easier for immigrants to come in and start working and get set up than it is in a system that has a lot of social programs that the locals aren't willing to share with immigrants.
Okay, once again, this has literally nothing to do with what we were talking about before. So I'm going to ask you again.
Do you think that
the existence of protected classes and the ability to take your employers to court, for instance, over perceived discriminatory practices has a positive, negative, or no effect on the amount of discrimination that's going to occur in your society?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay, I think you're being dishonest here. I think the answer is fairly obvious. That the answer is
yes. I think you're being overly
having
aggressive.
These things codified in law and being able to be taken to court. There are plenty of historical examples over.
Why are you being so aggressive in this discussion? We were just going to have a conversation here. I don't understand what's going on.
I think that any part of a responsible conversation, especially one on the public platform, is adequate pushback for ideas that I perceive to be harmful. So
Well,
I mean, that's basically what I'm
okay,
doing.
but I haven't even given you an introduction at all. Like 3 sentences, and we're already getting into like the thick of it.
I
Won't
think
you
this is
like
a fairly
to
basic
warm me up?
question at the
Would you like to
moment.
warm me up into something a bit more convenient? I'm already dishonest. I already have to ask these like very deep. At least like let's get
These
to
are
these
basic
questions.
questions. These are protected
These
classes.
are not basic questions. These are
Protected classes
targeted
is not a
specific
basic
questions. We
question.
haven't talked about a basic question would be what do you think about property rights? What do you think about how the economy should be managed? These are basic questions, and then we can get to your questions. I'm not saying I'm not interested to answering them. Just it's strange to me that you're asking me these questions right at the outset.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for you to answer these questions, so I understand why they're strange. So what do you want
It's
to talk
hard
about
for you
first?
to answer these questions as well, as if your system is supremely better than mine.
I think it absolutely is, but that's okay. What do you want to talk about first before I get into my other questions?
Let's talk about the basics. I don't know. Sound like an introduction. That would be nice and civil.
Okay. I think that the existence of a state and its ability to do things like engage in regulations, to engage in social practices, to engage in things like, protections in the form of protected classes, and its ability to engage in antitrust, to bust monopolies and oligopolies, among very many other things, is going to be beneficial for the well-being of the citizens within that nation and, therefore
Okay,
their human well-being. So that's my
may
very
I
brief
ask you?
introduction.
May I ask you why do you think regulations and antitrust are important specifically, or like expand on that answer?
Yeah,
Please.
because markets sans regulations seem to have a bunch of issues that they seem to be very, very hard for them to adjust for and to them to properly take into account and make prescriptions and make solutions for. So things like, for instance, market externalities and stuff like this is something that markets on their own without regulations are basically incapable of dealing with to a sufficient degree. A lot of the analysis that you often see from very free market people relies on a number of assumptions that aren't true in the real world. The assumption of the homo economicus, the individual who has perfect information, perfect rationality, the ability to perceive things irrespective of time, and in a market that has plenty of competition without issues of monopolies or oligopolies, all of these things in combination tend to demonstrate that regulations play a fairly important role in being able to solve for those things that the incentives don't exist for to solve in just regular free markets without regulation.
Okay, cool. So pollution and negative externality specifically, I'm assuming, yes?
Pollution is one example of an externality, yeah.
Would you like to give me any something
We can
else that
work
you
with
had in
pollution
mind?
if you'd like to.
Right. So this is what's basically called tragedy of the commons.
Mhm.
So one way of managing, let's say dumping in a particular river is regulation, but another is privatization in the same way of splitting up the commons into private land. Now, if you pollute something that reaches my land or my area, then I can sue you and take you to court. That would be one way of dealing with negative externalities.
Okay, what about air pollution?
Same story. If you can prove that the air pollution is affecting you, you can take someone to court and sue them.
Why can't we do this now?
We don't have these things aren't privatized; they're controlled by the state.
Or maybe it's incredibly difficult to determine exactly from where the pollution came.
The pollution, you could determine where it comes from. That's not the issue, but it's more of, I think right now that there isn't a desire to split things up into private property, or some people may claim that it's difficult to say something is property with regards to, let's say, like areas of the sea. And if I control an area of the sea and I want it to be for tourist destination, and someone dumps water in someone dumps pollutants in there, then I sue them and said, hey, I'm making money in this area of water and you're restricting my income. You need to pay me compensation and clean it up.
So when you sue them, how do you
Take them to
who do you sue
court.
them from? From your like a world government here? So for example, if I throw things off of the coast into the Pacific Ocean and ends up washing up on your
Well,
place
like a
in
few
Southeast
miles
Asia,
off.
how do you do about that then?
So a few miles like off coast, if you say this area of this, I'm just giving an example of sea, but it can be streams on land, which would be easier to talk about. But you say this is mine, and if you dump into my area and I catch you doing it, and I can take you to court and prove it, then you'd have to pay
So
compensation.
I'm gonna ask you again. If I dump something off the west coast of the U.S. and it ends up in your property in
I
Southeast
can also
Asia,
yeah,
what do you do
sure. I
about
can
that?
also well, if I can prove that it was you. First of all, I'm assuming that the person who dumped in the immediate area, someone will catch him. All the downstream can also sue equally.
Okay, so I ask you then, you in Southeast Asia, how do you sue then?
Oh, so outside the country, you mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood. You mean outside the country in Thailand?
So I
All the
drop
way
something
over
off
there?
the west coast of the US and it washes up
Uh-huh.
on your territory in Southeast Asia. What do you do?
Well, if you can prove that it's me, then you can sue. Yeah, if you
But
can't,
how do
then
you
you
sue?
cannot.
Who do you sue it from? Like through what?
If you can prove who it was and that they did it, then you can sue.
Through what?
Through the court system.
What court system? A national court system? A global
National
government
court
court
system.
system?
Perhaps like governments can have arrangements between, this is a bit of outside the scope, but perhaps government can have legal agreements between each other that if someone hurts someone in your country, there's a way to resolve it.
Okay, so cooperation in between international governments making agreements about the prosecution of people who engage in wasteful practices, yes?
Specifically about damaging of private property.
Okay, this sounds like something that is...
Well, again, you've gone to a very edge case, but that would be the way for this one.
Okay, but when it comes to things like this like line of trying to prove this is extraordinarily difficult. Like if I engage
Fair enough, yeah.
It's like it's borderline impossible. So isn't it way more effective to just have a policy that prevents that pollution from getting out in the environment in the first place?
Because so again, if someone dumps something in that vicinity and forget for a second the fact that it washed over somewhere else, the person that affected directly first can sue.
Yeah, but things like air pollution, for instance, when there are thousands of entities just within a nation that all contribute to air pollution to some extent, how do you pin the blame on who, and how does that process work?
If you can prove that the quality of the air negatively affected someone's health or negatively affected your property, then you can take them to court and sue them.
Do you think it's realistic for people to be able to draw that chain of events, going from like a pollutant, from like one specific pollutant to exactly how much they polluted your property and the damages incurred thereof? Or do you think it's a lot more efficient to just have laws in place that prevents that pollution from occurring in the first place?
So typically, you could tell me exactly the effectiveness of this regulation. Obviously, it doesn't stop everything, and maybe you get a fine. So I'm not exactly sure that this is like a perfect system in and of itself. But essentially it goes like this: if someone dumps waste in your backyard, you sue them. If someone dumps waste in a stream,
yeah, but that's obvious. That's an easy thing to do. We can do this right now under our system, right? But we're talking about the broader things. We're talking about the important things. We're talking about the things like climate change that are caused by kind of global emissions into the atmosphere. How somebody's emissions in the United States.
We can talk about climate change if you like.
Yeah, so things like this, where it's basically impossible to pinpoint exactly how much of a fraction of each of your, the pollution on your private property is caused by this and this and this emitter specifically. Well, that's basically, it's incredibly, I think it's impossible to prove.
Can you give me an example? Sorry, because I think with regards to climate change, you're going to have to give me more specific example to what you mean. So air pollution or what?
Yeah, air pollution, like emissions, like carbon emissions.
Carbon emissions are, in the sense, smog is hurting my lungs or what?
Maybe in the sense that it contributes to broad weather patterns that leads your property to suffer higher occurrences of droughts.
I don't know if necessarily you could prove that, but then again,
it's not possible to prove that.
I don't think that right, but now you're also avoiding another problem. So if you're saying
but my system can deal for this perfectly, right? Because what we can say is we can say that
would be outrageous.
We can say we can say beforehand, like from the system of having like government and things like this, we can like, hey, we're gonna make laws against the emission of these things in the first place, and then we don't need to do these absurd working backwards from when this pollutant in any way, shape, or form affects your property and trying to draw the causal links as to exactly who caused this and who released how much and how much that's responsible for what's going on right now as compared to the 9 million other global actors doing the same thing. Like, it seems way more easy to just stop it at its very source and address it that way, and that's something you can do through my government. But under your system of whatever we're talking about here of minarchism, that's not possible. You need to do some weird back tracing thing to get this to work, which is much more inefficient.
What would you do about all the people that died as a result of your reducing emissions?
What do you mean by that?
Well, let's say you want to reduce drilling for oil because you're saying that releases emissions down the chain. You say, I want to reduce the amount of oil that is being extracted.
Okay.
And as a result, people on another side of the world, this is not negative externalities, this is positive externalities. People on the other side of the world did not have access or were unable to pay for a certain amount of energy because you reduced the amount of energy that's
Your
being
domestic
extracted in the
exports
ground.
of oils and stuff like that,
No,
yeah?
I'm just, but in general, like there's a global, obviously there's like a global effect, and some people on that side of the world, as a result of your restrictions,
Mhm.
are not able to get access. So, for example, let's say in Africa, they won't able to get electricity to a particular hospital that has a particular wing for premature babies, and
Mhm.
they need heat or energy for an incubator for a preborn baby. But you've made it very expensive for them to or impossible to attain that energy,
Mhm.
and as a result, the premature baby is dead. So
Yeah.
how do you compensate for these situations?
Yeah, so it's very simple.
Because
Number
just
one,
just
yeah.
just last
Are you
sentence,
gonna let
sorry,
me answer
sorry.
the question, or
Yeah, I just want to
are we
add
gonna keep
something
like
before you do.
piling on more dead dollars?
Just want to add some. So, for example, this is what I mean specifically. There's 3 billion people currently on the planet that have access to as much electricity as a refrigerator light, and 1 billion that have access to no energy at all.
Okay, cool. So I want to note and demarcate here that we have moved away from the issue of how do we stop the emissions to now, okay, how do we deal with like auxiliary and external effects that come from our different proposed solutions to this? Because on
Mhm.
the question of the solutions themselves, we've, or at least you moved off the point that your solution to this is some sort of like back tracing from when it affects your private property is incredibly inefficient and way
No,
more
I
difficult to
disagree. I'll
implement
explain.
and punish for, as opposed to a system that stops it from the very get-go. So I want to acknowledge
No,
that, and now I'll
I
move on to
disagree.
answering your questions. So
I
when
disagree.
it
I'll
comes to,
explain.
I must be allowed to answer your question, right? I just want to
Sure.
characterize something in the beginning. So when it comes to things like, okay, how does the changing energy landscape of the world, how does
Mhm.
that change and how does that affect the ways that this is going to play out on a global international market? And things like this are going to be very difficult. Whenever you modify, whenever you reform, whenever you change different aspects of a supply chain, there's going to be a lot of downstream effects on that need to be taken into consideration. The best proposal and the best solution that I've seen right now in regards to solving for things like climate change and reducing emissions in a responsible capacity are multilateral trade agreements, where basically you engage in large international trade agreements with the world's global emitters, in a sense where you all decide to, number one, curb your emissions to a certain extent. And because everyone's part of that, there's going to be a collective roof, so nobody can like outplay the others by not going underneath this roof of emissions, and thus they themselves make a lot of profits at the expense of the others not taking advantage of it. So everybody goes down, but that's more of an issue of how to reduce the emissions in the first place. But this international treaty also needs to have a wide range of different things put in place in order to prevent the negative externalities that we talked about. So for instance, countries that are going to be hit disproportionately by these caps on emissions, by potential bans on new energy sources, need to be given specific international aid when it comes to them being able to invest in energy sources that they can use to compensate for the loss of these dirty energy sources. And that's going to be the way we're going to have to solve this. It's going to have to be through international aid. It's going to have to be through conversion of the energy output we have right now into more sustainable and renewable energy sources that ought to be subsidized by the government and by these international trading agreements in a way to bring the prices to more affordability and to help those developing nations develop their own energy generation and energy resources that they can use for their own country's purposes. So I mean, that's just one solution. There are very, very many means by which you can get around this, but yeah.
Okay, so you didn't really answer my question,
I
and
absolutely did.
I'll explain why.
Okay.
But firstly, I just wanted to say it's not that I'm jumping from topic to topic. I'm taking the whole topic in context, meaning if you drill for energy, yes, there are emissions, but also there's positive effects. That is the full context, not jumping from topic to topic. The thing you answered doesn't answer the problem, because what they need is energy, and they're not getting it. It's being reduced. So why everyone on the Western world or the
Wait,
industrialized world?
yes or no? Did I not say that you were going to
No, no,
subsidize clean energy sources
You said give them money. I understood. I
and
got it.
subsidize the other
Right.
energy sources? Correct.
Okay, I understand, but they're not
Uh-huh.
gonna get. They're not gonna get that. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have any of the things that the West had. Basically, the West had an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to obviously energy helps you with economic growth. This is not controversial. So the more energy you have, even your region entirely never had an issue with energy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was able to develop as a result of that. Like if either Norway's fossil fuel, or you had hydroelectric in Iceland, your whole area didn't have any issues with obtaining energy, and it allowed them to develop economically. They haven't had that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
We're increasing the price of like cheap, reliable energy like fossil fuels, and now we tell them, look, build some, here's some money, build some I don't know, wind farms or solar panels. Like they don't have the infrastructure for that. You've been giving them foreign
That's why
aid
we assist them with the
we've been
infrastructure
giving them foreign aid
specifically, right?
for decades. They haven't been able to. No, they
Well,
need to
that's
build
because
infrastructure
foreign aid
for
is a
that.
complex issue, right? So things like, for instance,
I'm just giving you an example.
yeah,
So
but there are
what?
workarounds to this within my
Let
system.
me take a more localized
Like
problem
you're
than
effectively
abstract.
asking me to explain the entirety of economic development and how that functions and how you control
Well,
for it in a
I
modern
don't need you
world
to
without giving
explain.
me adequate time to like hold a lecture.
No, just like on a conceptual level, if you have, let's say, fuel to drive trucks, then you can drive trucks more and more, and you can disperse products throughout the country, just as a broad concept. You don't need to give a lecture. But let's take a more like European example. So the UK, which I'm based in the moment, invested a lot of money in wind farms in, I don't know, the last few years. And in 2021, there was very little wind, very, very little wind. We didn't invest in solar because it's not a very sunny country, or maybe very little. And as a result, we needed more gas. And at the end of this year and now, and our gas prices have gone up 2.5 to 3 times more. Now we
Which
have
is
a
the case
situation
internationally everywhere, regardless of the amounts of wind you're
Oh,
getting.
now the problem we have right now is because we're restricting these, pollutant for reliable energies, is that people in the UK that were on fixed incomes or were just fixed income because they're retired or fixed income because they're getting money from the government, they now have to make a decision between paying for heat or paying for food. It's just one or the other.
So
Similar
throwing this all
to the
up to
situation in
renewable energy
Germany.
is really just, there's a lot more that goes into what's going on right now when it comes to oil prices than just renewable energy being invested into like too heavily. So I can give you a few
A
of them,
lot.
for
Oh,
instance.
well,
So
sure, go ahead.
yeah, so number one, we see global supply chain crunches as an effect of the things that we see right now post-COVID. It's largely responsible for some of the inflation that you also see just generally across a bunch of different nations, especially, OECD nations, which is what we're talking about right now when it comes to the case of Great Britain. You also see things like the sanctions of one of the major oil exporters right now, which is Russia. And there's a wide range of different things that are playing into this thing that, oh, well, we focus too heavy on renewable energy and now oil prices too high and working class families are suffering is incredibly one-dimensional and simplistic.
Right. So let me break it down. First of all, this happened already in November, so it has nothing to do with Russia. And even if it did have something to do with Russia, only 3% of the UK gas comes from Russia. It's technically coming from France. France has a lot of nuclear power plants. They provide 73% of the electricity, so France is able to sell us gas. Why do we need gas? Because when unreliable energy like wind and solar are at low peak, we need to turn on the natural gas power plants to compensate for that lack of energy. Otherwise, we're going to have blackouts. Now, you could say that
But you
everyone
notice
needed
how the thing you
natural
mentioned
gas at
before with
the same
France, the
time.
nuclear power plants, they're one of the key ways we have of getting off fossil fuels, right?
Hey, I'm for liberation of energy. If I'm for allowing all of them, but I'm not for, but restricting them has a cost. And I'm just trying to say that in the context, that cost can be severe.
Okay, and I understand. I understand what you're saying, and absolutely, there are better ways to do this, and there are worse ways to do this. And whenever you restrict something, whenever you restrict a resource in the economy, there are going to be downstream effects from restricting them. Absolutely, but I have full faith that we can make that transitionary process in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is responsible, and in a way that is in tune with the economic interests of other nations. So things like the demonization of nuclear energy as a source of energy, that needs to absolutely stop. We absolutely need nuclear energy to responsibly make this transition. But there are other things we can do. I mean, I mentioned the international program and things we have like that when it comes to international aid, and other things like circular migration play an important part when it comes to the development of nations and making political stability and all these things. Like, there's a lot of things, like, for me to be able to answer this question in its entirety, I basically need a lecture, because you're asking me about the entirety of economic development, like in the contemporary world, right?
Well,
However, what we can say
I
for
was
sure
hoping to
right
talk
now
about
is
my
that this is
system,
in
but
contrast to your world, in which you have no clear way by which to curb these emissions, and you are putting us on a clear and direct full steam ahead without even the regulations we have right now that aren't close enough towards irreversible climate change and the thousands, if not millions, if not billions of lives that might cost the world as a whole. So it's important to keep that contextual understanding, because you still have not provided an adequate reason or an adequate model or an adequate proposal through which your system would address climate change.
So first of all, I don't agree with you that the world would end and billions will die. That's extremely
Now, no one said
exaggerated.
the world would end, but the
All
effects
that
from
billions would
uncontrolled
die.
climate change is incredibly, like...
There's no model at all. First of all, modeling these things in the future
It's
is extremely
difficult.
difficult. Let me just finish. So just before I continue, I don't have faith in my politicians to solve the problem, because right now Boris Johnson wants to build an even bigger wind farm on the Irish Sea. So we haven't had wind all throughout 2021. At the end of November, December, my specific energy bill was already 2.5 times. Seven power companies went bankrupt. So I don't have faith, because if I did have faith, or if it was at least in the right direction, they would restart the Hinkley nuclear power plant, but they're not doing so.
Yeah, but the difference is
But
at least
anyway,
our
with
system has
regard,
the capacity to solve it, even though we might have actors right now that aren't perfectly conducive to that cause.
right,
Well, your
but
system doesn't seem to have
we're
the
dependent on
capacity
these
even to solve
politicians.
this.
Basically, they are the ones, like basically like kings and queens. They're the one deciding for us if we go. Their mistakes affect all of us.
Yes,
Whereas
the
in a free market,
democratically elected leaders are going to have a disproportionate amount of power over how our political structures function. No shit. But at least our system has the capacity to solve these issues. Whereas your system of our minarchism, I suppose, has no route, has no path by which to solve this whatsoever. So yours is
well, let me give you.
categorically enabled of solving this, while mine is it might be enabled depending on who's currently in the driver's seat. So
Okay, let me give
nevertheless,
you.
I prefer my system.
Let me give you a few examples of how my system. So first of all, I don't agree with your catastrophic world-ending billions will die scenario.
Do
I
you think
completely
climate
disagree.
change and the effects of
But
like
let me look.
unprevented climate change is going to be devastating for humans all across the
So
world? Yes or no?
do I think the climate change is going to be devastating? I
Yes.
think that with any change in the climate, currently the models we have at the moment are very difficult to predict what's going on, and I, to some degree, believe that more developed countries can handle these climate changes better. So
Yeah, of course,
countries that
more
have access,
developed, but that's
but that's an
obvious.
important, okay, but that's an important point. Meaning, a flood in I forget the area. I don't think it's Tahiti or Haiti or something. Haiti. A flood in Haiti wiped out all, the unstructured huts that they had there. Thousands die. A flood in America, I don't
Floods
know.
aren't important. Floods are not the
But
major thing that's going to
I'm
kill us
giving
from.
an
Yeah, but
example.
you're picking the weakest effect of climate
Can you just
change.
let me finish my point? It's difficult, and plus I want to get back to the how my economic, not just in general.
Okay, before you do that though, I wanna resolve some of this poor climate change science that
But I want
you're
to
giving right
finish
now.
my.
Yeah, sure. I'll let you do that. But I just wanna address this. So the major issue with climate change isn't that we're gonna have flooding. It's that things like our food production capacity is going to be magically cut. People are going to
Okay.
starve. The amount of diseases that we're going to have going around is going to be a lot more prevalent because of the overall heating. Tropical diseases will now spread to areas where they have no business being otherwise if it hadn't been for things like climate change. Ocean acidification is also going to make things like the obtaining of seafood, which is another food source, become far more difficult. The things like droughts and other, kind of environmental issues, while they might not directly kill a lot of people, the issue is that, hey, it destroys the capabilities for us to make food. Starvation and disease, as well as, economic consequences of climate change, are going to be some of the major ways by which climate change is going to cause issues for us as a human race. It's not going to be floods and people drowning in floods. And characterizing the biggest effects by climate change, or even a representative effect by climate change by just talking about the floods, is non-holistic. You need to talk about the main issues with climate change, which is the food shortages, which is the diseases, and which is those types of issues. So yeah, just wanted to add that there. But now you can feel free to answer
Okay,
your question.
cool. So I would say I recognize that you apparently have had a bad day and you're upset at something, and I don't think it's anything with what I said, or at least I hope not. But with regards to my point and the points that you've raised now, the example of the flood, and I'm not taking the flood specifically as the example, but I'm taking the sort of the planet trying to kill us, and climate change is enhancing that, or making it more problematic. Um, if Haiti had like more infrastructure, more access to more energy, for example, they could have used human innovation and human, capacity to prevent so many people dying. As in, we can master our climate ourselves. The more we build things, the more we have access to energy, the more we're able to master the environment, and the less climate death goes down as a result. In fact, currently, right now, uh, as compared to 100 years ago, climate death is 98% lower than it was back then throughout that period. Now, specifically, your points on food. Obviously, we're doing very well on food, and it's a surprising topic that you're raising, because it reminds me of the 1968 population bomb that said that by the year 2000, we're going to ration out food, and as a result, China did that one-child policy to resolve that. Food, less than about 1% of our population uses food. We're extremely efficient at it. We use a variety of different machinery and different technology even nowadays to produce more food. So I don't see this particular issue. Even if there's less area of land, we're just very efficient at growing food, even if it's inside cities and in sort of different ways.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Heat,
just quickly fact check this because you're not correct on this. So from the United Nations Foundation, specifically talking about the effects of climate change on food production, yield growth for things like wheat, maize, and other crops has been declining in many countries due to extreme heat, severe weather, and droughts. By some estimates, in the absence of effective adaptation, global yields could decline by up to 30% by 2050. 30% is a pretty massive cut by 2050, which is just 30 years from now.
You answered your
yeah.
question. You already answered your question. In the absence of effective adaptations, we can adapt. We have the means to adapt. We just need to implement them. I would assume that what you're saying is areas where
I don't know how much into this call, and you still haven't given a single way by which your anarcho-capitalist system
I would
resolves
assume,
this.
I don't know. Yeah. Look, again, I realize you've had a bad day, but with regards to the adaptation, obviously we can adapt. We have technologies, we have access to energy. I'm assuming that countries in the world that don't have access to it right now would need that, but it can happen. But with regards to heat, because I'm moving to the other point you raised, technically less people die from heat than they die from cold. Cold is a much
it's the
worse...
diseases that the heat brings. I specifically mentioned malaria, no?
And excellent. Okay. Much more people die of cold than they do of heat. Significantly by I don't know off the top of my head, but cold is a much larger killer than heat is. Obviously, like you can say that some places will, get hot, but then they could use air conditioners and fan, and they need energy for that kind of stuff. Ocean acidification, I don't know if that's to do with heat or with pollutants, but I guess I'll take that on notice, particularly what you mean. But droughts and things like that, I mean, we can...
Are you going to address the tropical disease point at all, which is the whole reason why I brought up heat?
Oh, diseases? Yeah, we're very good at addressing diseases right now. I mean, we just had one that brought the whole world to a standstill.
Very capable of dealing with that.
We developed a vaccine. I don't even know why that was raised. But anyway, in general,
are you?
Okay. We can resolve these issues through human innovation. Or at least I have faith in human innovations and human abilities to master the environment. But I'm not saying is
that your solution to this? Is how this is how anarcho-capitalism deal with this? Just human innovation will deal with it and just kind of.
I'm not an anarcho-capitalist.
Minarchist, my bad. So is that your solution? Just we will innovate our way out of it, undefined, citation needed. Is that it?
So first of all, I don't need citations because I'm looking at historic trends. In 1968, we said that the world will have to ration food at some point because of overpopulation. That hasn't happened. We'd say that we would run out of several minerals and ores, and it would be too expensive to use them. That hasn't happened. In 1970s, it was the world will freeze. That hasn't happened, or it won't even happen. In 1980s, it was the world will overheat. And
so
the
once
ozone,
again, this doesn't prove your point in any way.
We've sealed the ozone already. We've sealed the hole in the ozone already. In 1990s, we had acid rain.
Do you know why the ozone layers got solved? The ozone layer got solved because of massive international governments, governments coming together in an international agreement to limit the emission of CFCs and stuff like that.
We sealed the ozone up, not reduced it. We
reduced the emissions of CFCs, and because of that, the ozone layer healed. Wonderful. And the reason we did that was because of international regulation. So this is a perfect point in my favor.
You could have just said, look, these hairspray bottles causing the ozone, and customers would be concerned with that. And
just tell customers that, hey, this is bad for them, and then they will all stop using it. That seems...
Well, yeah, I mean, technically every country that above a certain point of GDP starts to care about the environment considerably. It's called the Kuznets curve. We start caring more about the environment. We start planting more trees. We start using light bulbs that are more energy efficient. It's very common.
So to be clear, your solution to climate change is that we will make innovations, and that people will choose things that are economically inefficient for them just independently because it's better for an abstract environmental issue, like for example the ozone layer or climate change. Is that
my specific point is that the models that predict gloom and doom don't factor in other considerations like human innovations, the ability to overcome the environment,
Damn, you should really let all these climate scientists that are making these models know that you figured out the solution to why their things are all
Okay, so
doomsday.
if you want to learn more, I'll advise people to read more about Alex Epstein. He's available on the internet.
Wait, you didn't even know how the ozone layer was fixed, and you're telling us about further reading? Like, you don't even know about the Montreal Protocol, which is literally like one of the most successful international environmental regulations of human history, really. And that's the biggest reason. That is the direct reason why we solved the issue with the ozone layer hole. And you're here going to tell us to do further reading?
Specifically, my point. Well, look, again, I don't think you can escape the fact that if you reduce energy, if you reduce like the extraction of oil or fossil fuels or natural gas from the environment, then someone is going to suffer. Either the West in like a more costly way, or the poorer countries like Asia or Africa that will mean people don't have access to energy. That is the context of what you're arguing for. All I'm saying is the models that predict these things don't take into considerations past trends. They cannot. It's very difficult for them. That's all I'm saying. So it's like, oh, everything's going to end, billions are going to die. Don't you think that's a bit exaggerated in your opinion?
I'm gonna stay in line with what the majority of climate scientists says, and the way that the UN and pretty much every single major scientific organization are very clearly and directly stating that climate change is one of the greatest threats to human life that we're gonna have to deal with in the upcoming years. But that's okay.
The majority of climate scientists agree that man-made climate change is real, which I agree with.
But not just that. It's not just, oh, this is something that exists. This is.
But there is no consensus to your model that billions will die and everything and gloom and doom. There is no consensus at all to any of these models.
When you say gloom and doom, what do you mean? Do you not think that the major,
you just said billions were going to die? There is no consensus to that.
Billions, I will admit this, billions may have been a bit of an exaggeration, but like millions and millions and millions of people will die. Absolutely.
Okay, can I go back to the original topic of how my system...
One second, but before we return to the original topic of like Americans, I just want to state that your solution to environmental issues is humans will innovate their way out and humans will adapt. And that's your well thought out explanation for how this will function, but that's okay.
Right, so again, you're mischaracterizing what I said. I said, first of all, these are important points that looking at trends in history, humans have innovated and have mastered their environment and protected human life. Obviously, the flood was an example, but the idea is that you can't, at the very least, you can't model for these things. So
but by your logic, it's impossible for us to have another extinction event, right? I want to go to 2 more points. Because you can just list through all the potential extinction events that we've survived and then be like, okay, we've survived all these, so we will just survive the other one. This is bad logic. This doesn't make any sense.
You don't have any extinction event. You don't have any credible model for an extinction event at all. Zero. Like it's not there is no model that,
so just
there is no model that says that the world will literally you said billions the world there is no model for that.
Just because we have survived incredibly severe threats to human well-being in the past doesn't mean that we will be able to deal with all of them in the future going ahead without any difficulties. Because the thing with your logic is that it works until it doesn't. But the
we're talking about risk. Yeah, excellent. No, I got you. I understand what you're saying. We're talking about risk.
No, but we're talking about that your logic you are fundamentally incapable of answering the question how to deal with this.
You're saying there's a risk. I understand what you're saying. It could happen. If it didn't happen in the past, doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. I got it. I understand.
So just gamble with the lives of millions.
No, I'm going to answer. I'm going to literally answer your point.
Are we finally going to get your solution to climate change? We're like, I don't know how many hours in, but yeah.
Look, there's a risk. Okay, great. So let's start with this. Did you know that Rockefeller saved the whales? What does that mean? Rockefeller, the guy who was working with that invented Standard Oil, that really cared about, that was straight out the door about refining oil and was very good at reducing the price of oil over time. He saved the whales because before then, people would hunt down whales and use their blubber to heat, those lights that used fire. Like
this gets you no closer to showing.
So here's an example with the market. Just by itself, saved like a large population of whales.
So therefore, it's going to solve us through climate change. Like your logic doesn't follow.
What does my logic not follow? Did he or did he not save the whales?
Just because he saved the whales doesn't mean he's going to solve climate change, dog.
Okay, but here's an example of where it happened.
Is that not okay? I think trust me. I think you've made your argument to the peak that you can.
Let me move to the next one. So now, this is not necessarily something I agree with, but we did say, for example,
I picked the first topic with protected classes. You picked this one with emissions. I want to go to another one.
You chose it.
No. You chose emissions.
regulation.
I give you my initial statement, and then you wanted to focus in on externalities and then emissions. So I'm
Okay,
gonna throw
let
one
me just
on
end
now.
with this last point because this is because it's something you probably care about. So we do have something I don't necessarily agree with called an ESG index. ESG stands for environment, social, and governance. So ESG index is a way in the finance industry, and it's typically tied to pensions as well, that it will rate a company by how much it's hurting the environment, how much it's hurting society, and how much it's hurting governance. So a variety of different things. You can look it up online. And as a result, people who are conscious about the environment, and we spoke about the richer the country, the more conscious they become, Kuznets curve, they can choose to not put their money in certain industries that cause more pollution or cause more harm to society. Completely up to them, completely voluntarily. No one's forcing anyone. And let's be honest, it has a very big effect.
Citation needed again, but that's okay. We'll move
ESG
on to
index,
the next thing here.
ESG index,
yeah, but your
is very
ESG
common.
index doesn't prove that it has a big effect. Your ESG index just
It
proves
has a
that
massive effect.
you
Absolutely
can rank
a
the
lot of
different
people
firms
complain.
by how environmentally sustainable they are. But that's okay. We can move on to the
A
next
lot of
thing
people
here.
are complaining about
So,
this ESG, like in the case of fossil fuel, because they would rate low on this index.
Let's talk about things like regulations for medicines, for instance, or for house
Oh,
construction and
absolutely.
stuff
This
like
is a
this.
favorite topic of mine.
All right, excellent. That is incredible. So without regulations and just standard practice when it comes to the building of buildings or the treatment of medications and stuff like that, how will you make sure that this is safe for the population?
So there will be regulations, just market based and not from the government.
So what does this look like?
In this, let me get something quickly. So we're talking about market based regulations, yes?
We're talking about how your system will solve for these things that right now are
Yeah,
handled by
market based
government
regulations.
agencies.
Got it. So market-based regulations, you can have like standard bodies, consumer protection and safety groups, certification firms, business insurance.
Okay, hold on. So let's go one by one here. Okay, let's not rattle off 9 million things. So you're basically giving the idea of like private evaluation groups that basically what they rank what do they do? Do they run inspections on buildings at the cost of whom? Do they set general standards? Do they give every firm that makes construction a given rating? How do they do this?
So let's take your medicine one. So you gave me two examples, medicine and what was that, elevators?
Construction,
or something
just
else?
general construction.
Construction, okay. So medicine, so firstly, I would say right now that I'm actually very upset with the FDA. The FDA is particularly slow at allowing perfectly good drugs out the door, or at the very least doesn't allow people to take some of the risk themselves. For example, the recent COVID vaccines, even though in January 2020.
Okay, can we get to your prescription, because you tend to ramble a lot. So how will your system adjust for these things?
Okay,
like how will your system do
so
regulation?
In short, the FDA kills hundreds of thousands of people every year because they're too slow and they have no incentive.
Incredibly worthless number if you don't take into consideration how many they save. But that's okay. So moving on. How will your system solve for this?
So they would just move the FDA's functionality into the market. It would just not be through the government. So, for example, doctors would pay like a particular entity to go out and research these drugs and say these drugs are not good for this, these drugs are good for that, there's a certain risk. And the doctors will then evaluate with their own patients what's best for them. So each individual and each specialist will try to give as much information as they can.
Who licenses these doctors? How do you know that your doctor is reliable?
How do the doctors themselves get? They can, go through a particular licensing process, or
okay, whose licensing process?
It won't be a license; it will be a certification form.
Okay, whose certification forms? From what?
There'll be market-driven solution.
So anyone can open a medical certification company and just basically sell medical certifications to people who want to be doctors. Yes.
To some degree, there won't be any barriers to entry, but over time, the market will see who is more reputable.
Okay, over time. So in the meantime, when you have, a bunch of people going to doctors that they think is reliable with what they think is good licenses, but then who end up having gone to some bogus licensing school where they are taught, like, I don't know, essential oils or whatever the fuck, or they just people, oh, too bad, you guys got fucked, we're stabilizing the market at the moment. Is that just
if someone committed fraud with a bogus certification, they can be sued?
No, but it's not bogus certification. It's a certification from a licensing firm, but I mean, the licensing firm has no standards that they need to be kept to.
You can have a third party that if you're not sure which doctors in the area are good or not, you can have a third party that says these are the best doctors in the area, and you'll pay them a fee to tell you.
Okay, what if me as a doctor, what if I pay that third party to give me a good rating?
and commit fraud and like lie about
But
the
it's not
ratings?
fraud. It's just two individual economic actors making a decision based on their mutual interest. It's not fraud in your system.
If you're asking someone to lie and as a result you got hurt from it, that would be something you could take someone to court over.
But they're not.
And
They're
you'd
not.
also
They're not lying. They're just. That firms. They
you
don't need.
are
They don't need to be kept to any standards of practice. They don't need to be kept to any regulations. This licensing, this reputation based firm. They believe, that this, by their standards, hey, this doctor is a very reputable doctor. The fact that they pass some money on the side, it's not relevant. They just think that's a really good doctor. Like, these are just.
well, it is relevant because they didn't evaluate him, and as a result,
Wait,
if
they
he's
might
not
have
good, then
evaluated him. They could absolutely have evaluated him,
if
but
they
they just paid
if
him.
they evaluated him, then what's the problem?
Because maybe that evaluation isn't quite fair. Maybe that evaluation doesn't keep or doesn't maintain or doesn't test for the standards that we would want to see
Okay,
among
so
our
if
medical
as a result,
practitioners.
that firm whole point that the way they get money from their clients is to be good at what they do. If they ruin that relationship with the customer, they don't do their actual jobs, they'll either get sued if it's very negligible, or they'll just lose their entire market and go bust.
Okay, so
And
once
all their
again, you have
effort,
a, you have
all
now
their
we
effort
have
after
situation
all
two
their
of a
effort
bunch of
after
a
years
bunch
and
of
years of building
consumers are going to get hurt in the meantime in very severe ways, right? This is medicine we're talking about, right? These are things that we make to treat and impact the human body in very, very precise ways that could be very dangerous, and they're going to be caught in the crossfire while the market stabilizes. That's situation number
Right. So
two for this, yeah?
the problem with your precautionary principle right now is you're not giving people the choice to make what's right for their bodies. Like there's a
Do you think the
vast number
average
of
person knows what the best medical treatment it is, like to
even if
treat the
they
disease they
don't,
have?
they can even if they don't, they can engage with someone who does
But the thing, but
and make conclusions for themselves. But bear in mind the fact that you're taking away that freedom to choose from them means hundreds of thousands of people die.
you are not
They don't
taking
have
away their
access
freedom to
the
choose. They
latest
can feel
drugs.
free to choose amongst
No,
a range of
they don't have
licensed professionals that we know have passed a series of checks based on standards that we deem to be reasonable for the practice of medicine within our given jurisdiction.
Okay, and those licensed professionals, what do they have to go through before they are able to give their opinion? They have to go through 10 years or 7 to 10 years of practicing, hundreds of thousands of dollars. As a result, there's a shortage of those doctors. It is very expensive to see one, and people don't have access to them, and they die.
Do you think there's a reason why the treatment and the education for medicine is so long, or do you think it's just an arbitrary length that's just been put there because
Well, if you
we
at
want
the
to kill
very
people?
least, if you had like degrees, like let's say, you have a very
You have a
very serious problem.
semi-qualified doctor, you have a fully qualified doctor,
One
you have a
second.
quarter-qualified doctor. Is that what you're proposing?
Right now, it's the equivalent of having a brand new car. You can only get a brand new car. If you want a second-hand car, well, it's not safe. It doesn't meet the standard of this year because it was made 10 years ago. But you want a car right now. You want to drive, and so no, you can only buy a brand new car anytime you want a car.
Drive a car right now that is not deemed safe to drive on the roads.
Right. So if you buy a second-hand car, what regulations do you have on that? Nothing. But
well, you absolutely have regulations when you buy second-hand cars. Absolutely. The seller has regulations when it comes to the quality and the shape that the car is allowed to sell. They're allowed to sell the car to you in. The whole lemon laws in the US, for example, is a perfect example of this. If you choose to drive that car on the roads, you can face regulations and punishments for whether or not that vehicle is fit to drive on the roads. Like when it comes to car insurance that you might need to get on that, like there's a bunch of different regulations on this. Just because they're second-hand cars doesn't mean you have no regulations.
I think you're exaggerating, but right now you can get certain guarantees from the well, jumping topics. So you can get certain guarantees from the seller, and you can get certain insurances, but you can get a car and then 6 months from now it will go bust.
But that's the whole purpose of lemon laws, no? That are you aware of lemon laws in regards to cars?
If you exceed the lemon laws, then it's you can still have that problem.
Yeah, you can still have that problem, but you minimize the likelihood of that problem, which is what the lemon laws do.
And in addition, older cars won't have to face regulations of newer cars because at the time when they were built, they didn't have those regulations.
That's true, but you still have regulations in regards to whether or not that vehicle is permitted to be driven on the roads.
Back to the doctors. So if, for example, you had like a doctor, a medic, a nurse, like grades to these things, more people will have access to these. So if it's not severe, right? If they need something a little less serious and they're able to see someone that is very decently priced, then they can see them and be treated. Whereas right now it's very difficult and expensive. You have to go through a very difficult process with your insurer. Some people
you can be educated to be the education to be a nurse is different than the education to be like a general practitioner.
What is the I agree, but what is the problem that they're trying to treat? If it's something small that the nurse can handle, then great. If it's something
nurses exist under the system right now of licensing. I don't understand what you're talking about.
Yes, but nurses can't treat people in the same way as doctors can. I at least go straight to a doctor. I don't go to a nurse, or I don't go to a
Well, it
medic. I don't
depends
go
on
to a
what your issue
medium.
is. If you've like scraped your knee, there's plenty of nurses available. Like you can go to like a school nurse, for example, or maybe your workplace may have some form of like physio or nursing. I mean, it depends on what
No,
issue
no,
you're
not
talking about
really.
specifically. But if it's something that's complex enough, then yeah, you're probably gonna need to see a general practitioner.
I can't see, the nurse won't see me for a scrape. I have to go straight to the doctor, or scratch
You
here or
need to go to
something
the
there.
doctor for a scrape, really?
At least here, I don't know what it is with you. I think
So,
you're
couldn't
exaggerating.
you just put some alcohol on it and just put a band-aid on for a scrape?
Well, if my child, for example, got a scrape, I would see the doctor straight away.
Damn, your kid is gonna have a lot of visits to the doctor then, I guess. Huh?
Well, I think again, I think you're exaggerating a bit.
I'm exaggerating.
Yeah. So we get.
Okay.
So I gave you the answer with regards to there'll be like degrees to what kind of person people can see. There will be a sort of FDA, but it will be market-based. So at the very least, the incentive of the market-based FDA would be to actually heal people and not to just say no to everything. And and I can go over a variety of different things, or business insurance. If, for example, a doctor did something fraudulent or something negligent, they would lose their insurance, so on and so forth.
So, okay, you're skipping over so many, and whenever we go to something
What did I miss?
individually, we end
Sorry.
up getting stuck on like a bunch of different things. So we mentioned
What did
before,
I
when it
miss?
comes to the reputational systems that we talked about, that these systems can very, very, very simply be gamed. There are reasons, there are incentives for these firms to cooperate with one another in ways that is not beneficial to the interests of the consumer. And this is where we would like some third-party arbitration. We would like a government to be able to step in there and be like, hey, you're not allowed to offer these services unless you meet these and these guidelines. And we want to have these guidelines in place because these are deemed to be reasonable guidelines that we need in order to, help protect consumers or help protect the recipients of these products or services. There's a reason why, education to be a doctor is so long, because there's a lot of things you can fuck up with being a doctor. And I don't want to give people like, I don't want there to be semi or quarter qualified general practitioners going in there doing the work of a fully qualified general practitioner, because that's going to really, really hurt those consumers, because they're going to be more likely to suffer adverse health consequences because of their engagement with these doctors, which I don't think is a beneficial thing. And this is furthermore,
So again, right?
this is
So
exaggerated even
reputation.
more with the issues of potential monopolies and oligopolies, which your system cannot address, for which could be an interesting segue we can go off from here.
I can answer that. I can answer that right now. So again, reputation is only one out of many layers of things that the market can help
The
you
demon
solve.
mom answer. I love to see it.
Sorry?
No, don't worry about it.
So reputation is only one out of many different ways for this to get to solve. There's a variety of different layers to give adequate care. Certainly, my system will allow people to get care faster at a much more accessible and decently priced offering. If people can't afford to see a particular doctor that they need, there will be charities, non-profits, social entrepreneurships, volunteers that will be able to help. So I think my system will certainly be more reactive, more efficient, quicker than any government bureaucracy can produce. Certainly one that stalls new medicine, new treatments, restricts the supply of doctors by a very, very serious degree, therefore increasing costs on insurance companies. These are the things that could be resolved, at the very least the American model. These are things that could be resolved in my system relatively easily. Would you like to talk about monopolies?
Yeah, let's talk about monopolies and oligopolies. So fundamentally, without antitrust laws, you don't have like a top-down way by which to resolve and break up these monopolies and oligopolies.
How would you classify monopoly?
I think the exact I think the classification for oligopoly, I think, is a lot more subjective. But for monopoly, it's when you have one firm who has, I think, basically entire market control over a given good or service in a region or in an area.
Entire control.
I think for monopoly, I think that's fairly true.
Entire control over a market or yeah.
I think something like that. Yeah, I don't know if it's entire or like vast majority exactly. But I can check that right now.
I don't think anyone existed in
the exclusive possession or control. So that would be entire control. Yeah.
I don't think anyone existed then. Exclusive.
Yeah, thanks to a lot of antitrust laws that we have right now in the books.
So, no, I would characterize the monopoly differently. I would say that a coercive monopoly, a monopoly is the charges price indiscriminate of the demand, meaning they can just charge whatever price they have, either as a result of having full control of something, so on and so forth, but they can just charge prices as high as they want and no one can stop them. and none of those exist ever in the free market. There's not
Well,
been
that's
one.
because we've never had
And
an
every
entirely free
time you
market
wanted,
system, no? So then I ask you then,
well,
if you have
we had freer times in
if
society.
if you have a so is your argument then that monopolies will never arise under a completely free market? Is that your argument?
So coercive monopolies will never rise
Okay,
under a
what's
free
the difference
market. You
between a
can either,
coercive and a non-coercive monopoly?
I just explained that you can raise price indiscriminately.
Well, you can do that in either monopoly.
Sorry?
It does any monopoly can raise prices indiscriminately.
Well, you can have a large player, but if they lower prices, like let's say in the case of Standard Oil, that every year on year they lowered prices, then they're not a monopoly they're not a coercive monopoly. Or if Google is a very large player in a particular market but charges zero for their services, then it's not a monopoly.
Well, yeah, but they don't. Yeah, they charge zero from the service. So that's because they make revenue in another way. But let's talk about let's say there's a monopoly within, let's say I don't know. Let's say grocery store monopoly. Let's say like a grocery store monopoly exists. If they're in a local community and they have a monopoly, what reason do they not have to raise the prices to the optimal point where they catch in as many consumers as possible and extract as much profit from that as possible? Why would they not do that from their own economic interest?
I mean, they can have an optimal point, but if they do it too high, then a competitor will build a store in their area. If a competitor sees as a profit motive, competitor will build a store in their area, and they will have a permanent competitor for many years.
Okay, so let's talk about this then. So let's talk about the rising of competitors, okay? So let's say that this grocery store has exclusive contracts with all of with the transportation firms of the groceries into that given town or region. And they have an exclusive contract with them in that they get really good deals and that the transport company gets a pretty big share of the revenue that's going around because this company is making a lot of money because they can put the prices really high. And therefore, it's going to be incredibly difficult. There's going to be massive barriers in place for any competitor to come in and do anything about that. So that's like structural impediment to the creation of competitors. Then you also have things that the firm can do, even if you were to put a competitor in place, in that big firm could engage in predatory pricing where they put prices down really low and they could even go on a loss for a period of time until eventually, because the consumers are going to act in the rational economic interest, they're going to buy from that big competitor up until the point where they're from that big monopoly up until the point where their competitor goes out of business, and then they can put their prices back up.
Okay, cool. So with regards to the structural, I mean, I think you've chosen a bad example because the new grocery competitor can just ask a completely new trucking company that hasn't done that route before, can you please deliver these vegetables to my store because I can't seem to source anyone else, and I'll pay you a little bit more, but at the very least,
you need a new grocery company, you need a new transportation company, you need
you ask a different transportation company to please service you, and you agree for an exclusive contract, as you said, with this new company that hasn't gone to this area before, but is going to do that for that particular grocery chain. So trucking, or you can use trains, or the transportation in general. There's a lot of options. You mentioned, what was that?
So let's say then that the grocery store also buys up all the reasonable places where you would be able to set up another grocery store, like within your own local community.
That sounds expensive. Sorry, so you mentioned...
That sounds expensive. These people are literally a regional monopoly for food. They can afford a lot of shit.
Food is a very low profit. Sorry, not low profit. The margins are very low.
In a competitive market, the margins are pretty low. Yes, that's true.
It's typically every time you pay for something, let's say in Walmart, for every $1, Walmart keeps 1 cent. It's just the bulk of it.
When there is competition, the margins are lower, yes. But if you have a monopoly, you can afford to expand those margins.
Sure. So what if another competitor comes by? I remembered your point. Another competitor comes by and said, we're going to charge really low prices, and then they're going to go out of business and we're going to raise the prices again. Okay, so two things you can do here. You can either have a situation where, not that one of them they can do and the other one they can't. So you can either have a situation where the competitor buys cheap products from the person who's lowering prices artificially and just buys products from them till they run out of money, and then they go bust themselves, and then they sell the goods back to the consumers, which has happened in the past. Or the other thing to do, let's assume that they went bust, and as a result of lowering prices for a long time, the main monopoly has now taken a loss and is back to charging prices high again. Then a new competitor will come by and set up shop who has not taken this loss, and start competing against.
But they
this
also
new
don't have
monopoly.
that initial like capital backing that the regional monopoly has. They don't have the same they don't have monopoly over the awareness on the consumer market there. They don't have the same establishment. They don't have the same just like people just knowing that they exist as a firm. They don't have the same maybe good contracts and agreements with other peripheral firms that are going to be beneficial to it. Like you're just like just another competitor will show up. Lamau, we'll just see what happens. And you still didn't address the point from before, for example, about like if like all the serious like considerable plots are set up, like a grocery store is bought by that grocery store monopoly.
All those are valid points. However, this particular monopoly is very aggressive on raising prices, and the new competitor just puts a sign, it's 50% off, and I don't know, send some flyers, and people are like, oh my god, 50% off my most important staple, and they'll go to the new competitor.
Yeah, but the thing is that number one, it's not going to be easy for them to set up for the reasons that I talked about before, right? You would need to set up an entirely new chain of new innovations and new firms sprouting out at every level of like supply chain that would exist within this grocery store, which seems very unlikely. They would just more likely want to set up in a different place where there isn't a huge regional monopoly.
Well, the regional monopoly is an opportunity to set up shop though, because the prices are very high, so they can make a profit even if it's just slightly less than the monopoly. So they can set up those things, certainly.
But if you start a new business, you're not going to have a capital to lean back on.
You can raise capital if you tell the backers to say, look, there's obviously a very good opportunity here. You will make money giving us finance.
And they're like, no, fuck no, that's ridiculous. There are a shit ton of like structural barriers to us being able to set up. It's going to be incredibly difficult. What do you mean? What structural barriers? The fact that
what structural barriers?
I mean, I mentioned one before when it comes to that. So you can have issues when it comes to the purchasing of land, which I brought up earlier that you still haven't talked about. You can talk about things, assuming that there are warehouses that are allowed to be leased to somebody who wants to set up a competitor to this monopoly. You have issues when it comes to the cooperation with peripheral firms, like for example, like transportation firms and stuff like that.
Right. The transportation is very easy. It's like it's this point that you're making. In terms of logistics, and this is kind of something I have a background in, this is not difficult at all. Studying something to send you stuff is not difficult. Maybe you won't get as good of a deal as the existing one, but you can still get your thing, your food or your packages or your containers or your pallets relatively easily. And with regards to setting up shop, I mean, you can find a place to do so. I mean, obviously, if it's lying empty and even the you may actually, not that it's something I'm recommending, but you may actually get subsidies or help from the local mayor so that there'll be more business and lower the price because he wants to be cheaper.
So if this was true, then why did things like the Rockefeller monopoly even like exist? How could I even?
Well, I don't agree that there was a monopoly because he lowered prices every year.
But that is absolutely a monopoly.
So according to the Antitrust, the thing with Rockefeller that I think is the issue is that because politicians just didn't like him. He didn't spend money on lobbying. He didn't interact with them at all. He just left them alone. He was very much focused on reducing prices for customers. To him, it was some kind of like ambition in life to reduce prices for customers. So, for example, there's a seal on a barrel, like the lid of the barrel, and he was once walking around and he asked how many dots of glue do you put on the top of the barrel. He said around 40, and then he tries, can you try 36 just to save a bit of money? So he tried 36, it fell off. So he tried 38, it stuck, and he's like, oh, I saved money for the customer. He really liked that kind of stuff, and he thought he was doing a public service. Which obviously isn't something you should always do, but he thought he was doing it for altruistic reasons. And then like the thing didn't really like him. So at the time when the antitrust came out, he had 92% of the local market, doesn't include the international. And then by the time he was taken to court, the court already started. They had 64% of the market. But every year on year,
Rockefeller literally engaged in things like predatory pricing, which is the thing that I talked about before.
He was not doing at all. Literally every year on year, he was reducing prices.
Do you understand what predatory pricing is?
I understand. It's the same as cost of monopoly. It's the same point.
No, it's literally not the same. It's actually the opposite. So predatory pricing is when you lower your prices.
So what does how does this hurt the consumer though?
What do you mean? How does this hurt the consumer? Because
how does something losing money on a particular product hurt the consumer?
But because in the short term it benefits the consumer, but the issue is then right after that they can afford to put prices back up afterwards. Yeah.
The theoretical scenario, I understand what you're saying, but in the meantime, if someone, so let's say,
yeah, sure, in the meantime, but that's in the short term, right?
Right, but let me explain. So in terms of the antitrust, the antitrust is to protect consumers. Not that I agree with antitrust, but I'm just explaining. It's to protect consumers. If consumers are getting extremely good deal on prices, there isn't a cause for them to take action. Because otherwise, you're saying the following: you're saying antitrust can be started when someone is raising prices too high. Antitrust can be started when someone's raising prices too low because they're being predatory, and antitrust can start when someone's hasn't raised or hasn't lowered prices because maybe he has a deal has a cartel deal with someone else, therefore they're not raising prices. In all those three scenarios, you can initiate antitrust. So it's a very confusing message for the business people. Should we start something? Should we not start something? I'll give you a different example. If you're just starting a company from scratch, new industry, everything, you're literally the only person in this new industry you've just invented, you're a monopoly, right? Because no one else is doing it. Should you even start? Because if you start and you get too powerful, or powerful in quotations, too big, then the government will, do antitrust on you. The public will hate you. Why even start the process of opening a new industry with new innovations if you know that you're going to get hit by antitrust?
Because you can start a firm and you can still make revenue and you can still make a profit off of that firm without being a
But you're the
monopoly.
only person in that market. You're literally a monopoly.
If you're the only, so like somebody makes like a brand new innovation. Okay, because even if you get broken down, then like after antitrust in the future, then that's still a positive endeavor for you.
No, it's the whole thing is a pain in the neck. Why?
Wait, what do you mean? Okay, so what you're telling me right now is that let's say somebody finds a brand new industry and they innovate into that and they are able to grow and grow and grow and amass like a significant monopoly big enough to which antitrust would notice. And then antitrust like, okay, hold on, you gotta chill. Let's have some competition going in this industry in order to bring about the positives that come with competition. And then at that point, you are still probably like a pretty big actor and a pretty big revenue generator within that industry. Mm-hmm. And this is on the whole like a negative economic thing for you? Absolutely not. This is a positive. It's not as positive as if you were able to retain and be a monopoly indefinitely, but it's still a positive.
But you're not understanding the key point here. If you start this process, if you know that there's a new market to be created, and if you start knowing that you will be the only person in that market, therefore holding 100% of this new market,
yes,
and you know that it's going to cause you trouble, legal problems, like going in front of Congress, public opinion of you will go down. This whole thing is going to be like a headache and very painful experience for you. And to some people, that's a
and
very
you will make millions
thing.
And billions on the way, probably.
Maybe not, but
no. If you're gonna get noticed by antitrust, if you're gonna have public opinion going against you, you're gonna make billions.
Right, but they don't want to. But it.
Okay, if they would make the decision that they don't want to make billions because of public opinion towards them, then I don't think this is too tough of a place for them to be in.
They don't know if they will or won't make billions. They haven't started anything. But if they have that image in mind, it may disincentivize them to start.
So then, if they succeed, what do they get then? They get billions, but negative public perception of them.
Right, but you're literally trying to destroy companies that are going to create new innovations and progress for the population, because the market.
This is not destroying. You still have an incentive to go into that, because even the worst case scenario,
sure, you have some incentive and you have disincentives.
But the worst case scenario in the case where you get antitrust is that you get away with billions. That's the. But the people doesn't like you.
Absolutely do not know that. You don't know how big it will get.
But if it gets big enough to the point where antitrust is going to notice you.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Antitrust
will notice billions.
You. Antitrust will notice you if you make hundreds of thousands, millions, or billions. It will start at some point. Would you open a business knowing that at some point the government is going to check in on you?
If I'm going to make a fuck ton of money on the way there, then hell yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Maybe not. Do you want to start?
But the thing is, if I'm not going to make that much money, then the government's not going to check in on me.
No, I don't agree with your assertion here. Just the fact that consumers are charged a lot of money. I mean, maybe if it's 100 people, but if it's like thousands of people and you're making hundreds of thousands, and the government is saying, or like the local mayor doesn't like it and he reports you to the antitrust, that could be enough for you to go out of business. Or
yeah, I think this is
the legal cost in
antitrust laws especially in the US, especially right now, are incredibly weak. If firms like Amazon aren't getting antitrusted, then I don't know what to tell you except for this fear is deeply irrational. Is
Amazon the only monopoly that delivers stuff or sells goods?
When was the last time antitrust was used in the US? Can you tell me that?
I think it was with Bill Gates, maybe.
Bill Gates antitrust, really?
The Windows and the Internet Explorer.
Oh, this was back in the what? In 1998?
maybe.
Wow. Okay, I'm super concerned about this. Okay, so let's talk about something else then. So let's
We
say
haven't
that you
had
have a
new
very important
we haven't
bridge.
had new industries since
Let's
then.
say you have an
Rock of
important bridge that's
yeah.
coming like a vital part of like logistical moving, and you have somebody who's very wealthy who purchases that bridge, and now they want to charge a very high toll for people to get in and out of to travel across this bridge. What do you do?
Pay the toll.
Incredibly expensive toll to the point where it'll like barely be economically worth it for you to.
Oh, go around then.
How do you? There's no other bridge.
There is no other bridge?
Nope. And building one would take years.
And I won't go there.
So you just upend your entire life and move. What if you don't have savings to move?
What you said?
What if your entire like life and well-being? What if your entire family settled down there? What do you do?
You said I'm a person driving a car and I want to cross a bridge. You're saying it's too expensive to go by. There's no other way. I said, okay, I won't cross it then. What
Okay,
are my options?
and what if you live on the other side of that bridge? What if you have family that lives on that
How
side?
is
What
it
if you have
possible?
like
How is this
permanent employment there?
hypothetical? How is this hypothetical even possible?
Somebody buys a big bridge. Is this really like inconceivable
There's
to
no
you?
other way, and now I'm stranded for life unless I pay him. What kind of nonsense is this?
How is this nonsense?
Ridiculous.
Somebody buys a very important bridge.
Dude, you are getting if you don't mind me saying, this is a little bit of a desperate hypothetical.
Somebody
so
buying an important bridge is like inconceivable to you?
Do you want to think of a different hypothetical, or do you want to carry on with this one? It's up to you.
Somebody buying an important bridge, is that inconceivable to you?
Someone buying an important bridge from who?
From whoever's owning it at the time.
Okay, and what contractual law does he have once he buys the bridge? What limitations?
He owns the bridge. Under your system, probably no contractual obligations, no legal laws, no legal regulations.
There are contracts law under my system too.
Not if you own the piece of property.
So
under your piece of property, would you not be allowed to do whatever you want with your property under your minarchist system?
You can't do anything you want with your... Well, let's put it this way. With regards to land specifically and right of access, because that's what you're asking about. Not anything I want to do with my land, because I can do more, certainly, that what the US doesn't allow people to hang their laundry in the backyard, or because whatever reason, I don't know why. But in the UK, let's say, if you buy a piece of land and there's like established walk paths through that land, or let's say a developer builds on two pieces of land, but one land is encompassing the other, and developer puts, when you buy this house, you have agreed to let the person go back and forth out of your land. Like there'll be like a shared road that both people will agree to maintain. And when you buy this property,
but you need to enter that agreement. There is no obligation for you to enter that agreement.
You don't have to buy the house. That's obvious. But if you do buy the house, you're under this contract.
I don't understand what you're saying.
So there's contract law with regards to land. If for example, a developer created two pieces of land, a house on two pieces of land, sorry. One land is encompassing the other, and the other needs right of access to reach the land. The developer would say, there's a road here. If you buy this house, and any person after that buys this house is agreeing to let the person have right of access to their own land.
What if the next owner just doesn't want to do that?
In the contract, they have to. That's it.
But the new person buying, I'm getting lost in the selfish. So okay, let's put this into the real world. So there is a bridge. Okay, let's say there's a bridge in Sweden. There's an important bridge, Öresund Bridge. Okay, it goes between Denmark and Sweden. Okay, we become anarcho-capitalists like that. Bang, the bridge can now be privately owned. Jeff Bezos goes and he buys that bridge. What do you do?
Okay, so he buys the bridge for what reason? To stop people from using it?
To put a really heavy toll on it.
So this is the example of a monopoly, a coercive monopoly, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so what would stop? So let's say it's super disruptive. Only very few people use this bridge, and it's
very few people do not use this bridge, my friend. It's a very well-traveled bridge.
Change as a result of this change, very few people use this bridge because they simply can't afford it. From your hypothetical, right?
What do you mean? Because they simply can't afford it. The person owning the bridge is going to have prices be just as high as possible, where they can make the most amount of profit from it.
No one is able to pay for.
Consumers are going to be hurt by this bridge, or like travelers are going to be hurt by this bridge.
No one can use this bridge because it's far too expensive. Yes.
No, they wouldn't do that. Why would you do that? If you want to make money off a bridge, you're not going to make it so expensive that nobody can travel on it. You're going to make it expensive enough to where you will make a lot of profit from it, because people will still choose to travel there, but it's going to be at a detriment to the people that choose to travel.
Okay, so and also from the supply and demand point of view, some people may not be able to afford it and some people will, but if the people who aren't able to afford stop paying because they can't pay for it, that means you earn less profit. So it has to be like a particular optimal point, right?
Yes, of course. But right now, that
Okay.
bridge is free.
Sure. We have a bridge going into Cardiff that's called the not the M6. There's a bridge going into
Okay,
Cardiff.
so that's just like
doesn't cost
your system is just like A-okay with that?
So my system, you either have alternative ways of reaching the country, which takes longer, obviously, and you don't have to pay any money. Or if it's so expensive, then someone may decide to build a new bridge.
That new bridge will
people,
take, like a new bridge, a new Öresund bridge would take probably decades, honestly.
then people will just have to go around.
That sounds really inefficient.
More ferry services would
You can just you can just have like a really rich person buy up a vital piece of infrastructure and then basically upend all of the logistical and traveling processes that occur there.
It's not upending, it's disrupting. And there are options to circumvent that. It's just inconvenient, and people obviously may not like that, and people will take certain courses of actions to get them from point A to point B. If, for example, it's so expensive, let's say someone works from one side and has to cross the bridge to work in another side, it may actually stop them from saying, well, this isn't worth it. I'll find a more local job because it's just too expensive, like in the case in the UK where the train prices keep going up and up, and some people just say, it's not worth commuting to London, I'll just find something local. But yeah, I mean, it's disruptive. People will have to take different actions. And at some point,
under my system, you can just have a government subsidized.
Under your system, you can't do anything.
What do you mean?
Is it public or private?
Well, in my system, it's public.
Okay. So,
but in your system, you don't have anything that's publicly owned.
So if it's like super expensive and disruptive, people may decide to spend some money and resolve it. There's a variety.
What do you mean when you spend some money and resolve it? What does that look like? Building a new bridge is gonna take like a decade.
Building a new bridge, setting up.
It's gonna take like a decade.
Around,
yeah.
Setting up ferry services that go back and forth.
So you build a new bridge that takes a decade, and the instant your bridge opens, the other person just lowers their prices back to like equal amount.
Hold on. So this is actually an interesting point. If someone will build a bridge, then they'll have a permanent competitor.
Yeah, but at that point, the original bridge owner can just lower their the price for their bridge back to competitive levels.
Not indefinitely, and they'll. Okay, so this is something against your point. If someone has a situation where they know they will get a permanent competitor, then they will lower prices, lower prices enough to avoid getting a permanent.
Yeah, but the thing is, if there's barriers to that, so for example, if there's going to be a decade of where you are able to basically like have incredibly monopolized like ownership of the transportation route, then you can get so much money, you can extract so much profit from that.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You yourself said that they can't raise it too high, otherwise people will stop using the service and then they'll start losing money. They have to raise it to a certain amount. If the certain amount is disruptive enough,
but that certain amount is going to be based on what makes them the most money.
Right, makes them the most money, but people are still using it.
And right now, the bridge isn't based on what makes them the most money. It's based on what it's subsidized because we see a common collective good in having travel across this bridge be easily affordable.
I don't know if it's easily affordable because you have paid a lot of money for it to be built. Typically, several times more than what a private person would do it, because government bureaucracy is super inefficient, and
So do you think that the average person so do you think the average person is paid more for the construction of this bridge than they would have to paying a toll traveling across it?
Absolutely, I'm certain. It will cost several times more to pay for it, and sometimes you even build bridges going to nowhere. It's the incredible inefficient of government bureaucracy is absolutely shocking if you look into it.
Okay, I think you're absolutely wrong in this, but yeah.
Please, it will cost several times more, and it will take several years longer to even finish this bridge. So in the meantime, if the bridge wasn't created, people went a different way, right? So people will use that way before. It's not like it always existed and now like it's gone or something, and now everyone's stuck. If the bridge is new or was new at some point, there was other ways of getting there. Those could be like strength.
But they are incredibly less efficient. Or maybe
some people will go on the bridge, some people won't go on the bridge. It will still be like to some degree.
But you make that entire transportation way less efficient and way more restrictive.
Let me give a more realistic example. So Canada, I don't know if it's relative to your point, with regards to the threat of a lifetime competitor. So Canada, for example, for the longest time, I hope they still are, was selling copper, but they were selling copper at a very low rate, and they were doing it in a way that other people in the world, they were doing the most, as far as I know, globally. I could be wrong, but they were doing like more than half of the world copper sales, and they were acting as if they're in a market where a competitor could be there. That is the point of why coercive monopolies
But
don't
that
happen.
depends on how easy it is for that competitor to set up
Let me
shop.
just
If it's going to take like a decade for that competitor to set up shop, then you're not going to do that. You're going to make as much money as you can in that decade, and then once the competitor comes in place, bam, you're going to go to competitive prices.
It's completely irrelevant if it will take a decade or 2 decades.
No, how is that irrelevant? Hello?
I'll explain to you why it's irrelevant. Once they have committed the money and committed to doing it, that's it. You'll have a competitor for life. You can charge half your price. They can even lower it even more to like weather the storm. And at some point, like you'll just have rock bottom prices for after that bridge is built.
I'm an independent bridge builder, okay?
What would be the point?
I'm an independent bridge builder, and I see this huge bridge that is now monopolized by somebody charging a lot of money for it, okay? And I'm like, should I build a competitor bridge? Well, what's that going to cost? It's going to cost a massive time investment, a massive capital investment to build this bridge across. It's going to be super duper expensive to me. And then once I build that bridge, all that's going to happen is that the person that has a monopoly is just going to put the toll back down to competitive wages. And it's going to be incredibly difficult for me to get a return on that investment.
Look, if you're building something that costs 10 years just to build, obviously you're looking at the long run here. So again, even in your scenario, there was something before the bridge that can be reused again, or like a division between people who can't afford to pay it and people who can afford to pay the bridge will use both the bridge and the previous way.
But way more inefficiently, because that's the whole reason why we have the bridge now, and that's what we have now, because it's the most efficient thing.
First of all, if you're talking about efficiency, the free market wins you hands down, easily. If you're talking about division of resource allocation, you know exactly where to go. So even in this case of a natural monopoly, if someone is raising the price just to upset people and charge them, they will get a permanent competitor at some point, and they can't lower prices forever. They simply cannot. That person has already invested money in there. It's a permanent competitor for life, and they would try to lower the prices to avoid that happening.
Yeah, I've already said everything I have to say.
Okay. So are we going to talk about my thing or not really?
Do you have another thing as well?
No, like the whole system, property rights, all that kind of good stuff that you guys like to ask me.
I feel like I've talked about everything we wanted to. I felt like we talked about externalities and climate change, and you didn't give any good solution for that whatsoever. Then we talked about licensing, and then we talked like all the ways that can be gamed and how unreliable and how risky that is. Then we talked about the purchasing of property and how really perverse activities can occur because of things like the investment necessary to make competitors and stuff like that. So I mean, I think I pretty much covered all the things I wanted to talk about.
Okay, so let me finish with a few things.
Oh, also we had the minority rights thing in the beginning, which was interesting too.
Well, again, my one is like very pro individuals, and most minority is an individual, and individuals do very well in my system.
Wow, but it's almost as if people can be discriminated for a wide range of reasons that don't have to do with their individuality.
Well, again,
that have to do with their belonging to a collective group, but that's okay.
In general, you'll see this in a difference between my system and yours. You're very itching to use force on people. You wanna use government force on people as much as humanly possible because you don't like certain things. You think those things
stop. As much as humanly possible. That's not true. I want to use government force insofar as it improves human well-being. So let's just correct that. Okay, next thing.
You like to control people, and you like to do it through government. That is your.
I like for us to do the best thing that we can to maximize human well-being. That's what I want to do. Yes.
And how do you know what it is for the human being? Because my system, at the very least, asks the well-being of what humans themselves think is good for them. Yours doesn't. Yours assumes to be some kind of like dictator that knows.
So your system concerns itself a lot with I think it's negative freedom specifically with the ability for you to do things and not be stopped from doing things. Your system is really good at that. Sure, there's very there's very few like hardline stops for your ability to do things in like a legal sense or a legal capacity. However, your system completely neglects a lot of the positive freedoms, which are very important and that often come about by some form of a state apparatus, where people can really act on the interests that have, where people can act on the desires they have and their, their what they think is going to make them happy through the access to, for example, affordable, easy access to education, a good place to be able to get employed, a great access to property and housing systems, and all of these different things. But yeah.
Okay, so your system can guarantee them employment, but with regards to positive rights specifically, the thing with positive rights
Well,
is
we can't guarantee them employment, but we can, even if they don't get employment, we can guarantee them a social safety net, for instance.
I can guarantee something. Well, I don't know if you can guarantee anything, to be honest.
Well,
but,
we absolutely can, given the
no,
state of like technological advancements and
can't
economic.
I don't think you can guarantee anything. I mean, even with regards to homes or
that's true. No, you're absolutely right at this. You're right. The anarcho-capitalism and minarchism is way more stable and way more able to provide things consistently.
I'm not an anarcho-capitalist. I have a government.
Okay.
It protects your rights and your property rights, your individual rights. If someone initiates force on you, the government will protect you.
Okay, so going back to the thing before, yeah, I want to do whatever we can to improve human well-being. Yes. What's your follow-up on that?
So the problem is that with what you're saying is, again, you're using force to let some people have more improved well-being, but other people have to pay the cost of that, meaning their well-being is diminished. You have to move resources from one place to another, or in a way, you can say it this way: if there's a group of people in your utilitarian, assuming, in society that have like a very low level of well-being, you would take money from other parts, or take resources, from other parts of society. You would keep 70% to yourself because that's the way the government does it, and you will give that group of people, so they'll have less of they'll have more utility, those specific group of people. But overall in society, you've made the average lower. You've literally made everyone else poorer off.
You're just stating that without any evidence.
No,
but that's
the fact. Obviously, that group of people.
It's absolutely not a fact. If you're going to say something's a fact, then I'm going to expect a citation. Are you going to send me a citation for that claim you made right now?
I will send you a citation. Absolutely.
Okay, you send me a citation for the fact that government allocation of resources leads to everyone being worse off. I'm really excited for the citation.
I will send you a citation with regards to the bureaucracy that the United States specifically.
So once again, this is you walking this claim way back for the citation you're about to give me. Listen. But that's okay.
I have a study that says that when the US government taxes people and the amount of money that then the recipients receive loses 70% because of bureaucracy and administration, whereas charities lose only 30% for administration and infrastructure. So charities are much more efficient. In my world, charities are much more efficient than getting services to the end client. Not only that, but obviously the government is less efficient than charities. Charities are on the ground. They can see what people need. They have a much higher rate of solving people's
But there's
problems.
a bunch of other issues with that as well. So, for example, you're less likely to get the same amount of absolute revenue for a charity system as opposed to a tax system. That charity is also going to be able to do less things when it comes to their ability to just do things like legally and with the monopoly of force in society as compared to what a government is going to be able to do because they have that same ability. So this is not a one-for-one comparison. It's not like apples to apples, but one is 30% versus one is 70% inefficient. A government can accomplish a lot more, and a government is going to have a way heavier pool of revenue to choose from. So this is an incomplete analysis. Your citation that you're about to send me will not prove your point.
So the government it certainly can steal a lot of money from people, but my point stands like this: in particular in the US, which is where the study is from, people that are extremely charitable. If you consider the efficiency, the bureaucratic overhead lost, and the amount of money that charities raise, including the number of volunteers that also produce value in a certain calculation, charities give more to the pockets of recipients than the government does currently.
So, first of all, what you just read out to me is not correct. This has been fact checked, so I can read you from like a Washington Post article on this specifically. So let's see here.
So I have a study. You want to ignore?
Is it the Bachman one?
Sorry?
Is it the Bachman one?
I don't know.
Okay, well, tell me what title it is. I assume it's going to be Bachman, no?
The Cost of Public Income Distribution and Private Charity.
By?
J.R. Edwards.
Okay, can you send this to me?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm sure your viewers will not find it wildly inaccurate that the government is inefficient?
Well, you'll be surprised.
Okay. Well, charities are more on the ground. They have at least the incentive of providing the people that gave them money, showing them that they are efficient with the money. You could also, if one charity does something badly, you could give your money to another charity. So they have an incentive to be more efficient with their money. And typically, like social entrepreneurs, non-profits, charities, food banks, for example, are almost entirely private, and a lot of people use them. And a lot of volunteers as well. The US
So
has a
hold
special
on, I can
charity.
read out. This is a quote from the authors of this study. Okay, this might make this statement more clearly. In particular, I'm not saying that bureaucracy consumes 70%, but rather that only 30% represents direct payments to the poor. Most welfare programs provide in-kind benefits, which pay providers rather than they poor. So this isn't saying that only 30% of the money that goes into taxes and government revenue is actually being used towards the end. It's just saying that 30% of them go in the form of direct payments.
In the pocket.
Yeah, which is very different from what you were saying, which is why I'm very skeptical to anything else you have to say, because you will just misrepresent things that you bring up.
Okay, let me just show a graph from the...
So now are we pivoting to something else right now, or what is this? Because you lied about what this study proved.
Fuck you, I'm not a liar.
Okay, well, you really come off as one, but that's okay.
I'm giving you the study.
Yeah, sure, but you told me that this study would show that governments are 70% inefficient, that only 30% there is actually used, whereas for the charity, it's the opposite. So you misrepresented this finding of the study.
It's a 70-30 split. The government will collect $3 billion worth of taxes, and the recipients will only receive $1 billion of it, and $2 billion will
in direct payments. I have a quote directly from the author here. You're misrepresenting. You misrepresented what they said. And if I hadn't had...
What are they getting? What are they? If I'm misrepresenting, what are they getting? You explain to me then.
Of in-kind benefits. So do you think that all welfare is just direct payments to the poor? I don't think you're this silly.
What specifically do...
No, hold on. You do... Come on. Do you think hold on? Do you think that all forms of welfare is the government directly giving money to citizens? Yes or no?
It could be a variety of different things.
Perfect. Like then we both agree. Then you know what those other things are. Then why are you asking me?
I'm not following your point of view here.
I understand that. Okay. I'm not taking anything more that you're saying for granted, because when I had someone that was very helpful for me that could check what you were saying right now on the spot, it turns out you were misrepresenting what you were saying.
Okay, what does that person say is the overhead that the government takes when it taxes people and how much money it gives them? Because, for example...
I don't know. You can throw out any form of thing to try to pivot now, but the fact is that you misrepresented what this said. And a quote, direct quote from the author of the study.
Against the wall and you're lying, because this...
I'm being pushed against the wall right now. Is that what you think is happening?
Pretty decent. I think this study is pretty decent. And I admit I don't have people in the chat like throwing stuff for my benefit, but this study is pretty good.
These are direct quote from the authors, dog. I'm sorry. Maybe you should be more familiar with the broader work of this person. But yeah. Thank you for the conversation, I guess. It was fun, if nothing else.
I think this was a complete waste of time, and I don't appreciate like the whole insinuation and the line of questioning. We could have had a nice conversation.
Maybe, but it becomes a bit difficult sometimes. But all right. God. Oh my God, Red. Play of the game from Red there. With that guys, can we have some claps for Red right now? Where are you, Red? Make yourself known. Because Red in Discord server was here pointing this out, that this person was just lying about the final thing that they were talking about.